After Vladimir Zelensky's disastrous meeting at the White House last week, every progressive pundit rushed to announce the impending collapse of the rules-based international order. Delusional commentators explained that any Ukrainian peace negotiation which acknowledged Zelensky's intransigence would signal the end of international law and national sovereignty. The assumption there is that international law is some kind of higher power to which countries can appeal and which the United States is bound to maintain. In truth, international law and the supranational bodies that theoretically maintain it are not guarantors of national sovereignty. They're actually the forces that will most likely destroy it. Sovereignty is defined as wielding supreme power, having the ability to make the final decision on any given issue. Sovereign entities will consider the interests of other parties and even the limits of their ability to project power beyond their own borders. But ultimately, a sovereign power is one that can make the final decision on its own. A sovereign nation doesn't need to check with other nations, and it doesn't need to appeal to a higher international body to validate its decisions. If a leader is appealing to an outside body to establish the sovereign rights of their nation, then they've misunderstood the meaning of that term. The political philosopher Thomas Hobbes grounded the principle of sovereignty in the state's ability to protect the people that it governs. A state that couldn't protect its own citizens or borders could not, by definition, be sovereign. No nation can last long without protection from hostile forces. So if the people of a nation aren't able to provide for their own defense, another political entity will assume protective duties and therefore achieve sovereignty. Carl Schmitt echoed Hobbes' sentiment when he wrote, quote, "If a people is afraid of the trials and risks implied by existing in the sphere of politics, then another people will appear that will assume these trials by protecting it against foreign enemies and thereby taking over political rule. The protector then decides who the enemy is by virtue of the eternal relation of protection and obedience." End quote. Despite the valiant effort of many Ukrainian men, the country is simply unable to defend itself. Zelenskyy was installed as the president in a CIA-backed color revolution. Western nations have sent hundreds of billions of dollars along with ammunition and advisors, but even with all that assistance, the Ukrainian military has barely been able to keep pace. The Russians certainly haven't been able to dominate in combat to the degree that they'd like, but ultimately it's clear that without the backing of the United States and other NATO allies, Ukraine would lose the war tomorrow. In theory, international law and organizations like NATO exist to defend the sovereignty of nations that otherwise couldn't stand up to great powers like the Russian Federation. NATO was initially founded to defend Western nations from the expanding threat of the Soviet Union, and even though that threat has dissolved, the military alliance persists, at least ostensibly, to protect the sovereignty of its constituent members. Despite the alliance losing its great antagonist, it's continued to expand, forever advancing its territory closer and closer to the Russian border. We should make it clear that NATO is the United States, and the United States is basically NATO. The US provided $830 billion of NATO's $1.3 trillion budget in 2023, with the next largest contributor being Germany, which clocked in at only $61 billion. That's why Donald Trump has repeatedly asked European nations to increase their contributions to NATO and to their direct national defense. Previous U.S. administrations have encouraged and facilitated the demilitarization of Europe while pledging to defend those nations with our own blood and treasure. This alliance may have played a critical role in stopping the spread of communism when Europe was weakened by 2 consecutive world wars, but having outlived its original purpose, it only serves to distort the reality of sovereignty in the modern day. Officially, Zelenskyy is the president of an independent nation involved in a war of territory with a great world power. In reality, the United States and its NATO allies are funding a proxy war with Russia. Zelenskyy should have a great deal of authority, but everyone knows that the real peace negotiations are occurring between Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. If the United States continues to fund the war, it could drag it on for years. And if we withdraw financial and military aid, the conflict would be over tomorrow. Ukraine can't defend itself, so it ultimately is unable to become the master of its own fate. Ukraine is simply not sovereign. Zelenskyy doesn't make the final decisions. The Ukrainian president forgot this fact during his meeting in the White House, but Trump didn't hesitate to remind him of it before showing him the door. It would be comforting to believe that a collection of international laws written down in the charter of a supranational institution could create an objective body to which lesser nations could appeal while maintaining sovereignty. But this is just an illusion. If a smaller nation must appeal to an international body, it's ultimately appealing to the will of other sovereign nations that constitute that body. The minute that one country must appeal to another state, it's dependent on the power of that nation for protection and is no longer sovereign. This geopolitical reality is disturbing to many because it ultimately means that very few nations are truly sovereign. They may have some degree of internal political autonomy, but even that can be quickly called into question. The U.S. intelligence services have had a great degree of influence on the affairs of foreign nations, in no small part because those nations are largely dependent on America for their own defense. Samuel Huntington's analysis that geopolitics plays out as a clash of civilizational blocks dominated by great powers has been proven correct. Supranational organizations like NATO and the international law that they enforce is simply a window dressing for the will of great powers acting on the world stage. Civilizations will continue to clash in a contest of great power politics, and for better or worse, everyone else is just along for the ride. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. If you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, the best way to do that is to head to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show. And when you do, leave a rating or a review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter or Gab or Substack or Instagram, if you'd like to get these videos on Rumble or Odyssey, the links to do all of that are down below in the description. If you'd like to pick up my book, The Total State, it's available in both print and audio form, and you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or go the extra mile and support your local bookstore, order it there. If you'd like to support the show, you can head to shopblazemedia.com and click on the Auron MacIntyre collection. There's merch there that you can pick up if you'd like to support what we're doing here. And of course, you can watch all of my episodes and read all of my columns over at The Blaze. Thanks to everyone for watching, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.